Well, welcome everyone. Got a couple of more minutes letting people in. So while we've got this time, just like to invite you to say where you're listening from so that we can see where we are based all around the world. We have so many people signed up for this, well over 1,000 people. We're not all going to squish into this little room, but you made it, so congratulations. If you're listening to the replay, fabulous. Let's see, so we've got people, oh, this goes so fast when there's so many people. India, North Wales, UK, Finland, Germany, Cyprus, Canada, Wales, Glastonbury, Devon, Texas, Greece, Turkey, Namibia, I can never say that. New York, Indiana. Jan, if you don't have sound, darling, it's probably your settings, so just have a little fiddle about. Lithuania, Italy. Okay, beautiful. So we have the wonderful ALEXIS KRIEL here, who I will introduce in a moment. We have the fantastic Gareth Thomas also here, who will also introduce in a moment. And we have my lovely friend Leanne, who is helping me on door duty. And we have all of you. So thank you so much for coming to Talking with the Ancient Ones. What I would like to do to start is to just take a moment where we can all meditate for a moment and come into our heart space. So I invite you to close your eyes, have your feet on the floor. You might like to place your hand over your heart area. And just bring yourself now to this present moment. There's no need to do anything at all. Just breathe. And try breathing in over the count of 3 or 4. And then exhale over the same count. Breathing in. And breathing out. Breathing into your heart space. And breathing out from your heart space. And as you're breathing from this heart space, see a glow of light in the middle. And with every breath, this glow of light expands and grows larger and larger. And this might be the pink or green of the heart chakra, or it might be rose gold. And let us hold the intention of sharing this unconditional love with all of the pangolins on our planet, wherever they are. beam this love out from your heart with the intention that this love reaches each and every pangolin around the world. And trust that your love reaches them, holding them in that space of rose gold light, unconditional love. And keep that connection. And softly return your awareness to your heart space, to where you are physically. And then gently open your eyes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about in this session? I'm going to be talking about pangolins. It's all about pangolins. And we're going to be looking at, why we're talking about pangolins. What is a pangolin? What kind of animal is this species? And we're going to be learning about what pangolins are experiencing at the moment. We're also going to be learning about how pangolins are being supported and cared for and loved and valued and respected. So I think the intention of these conversations between myself, Alexis, and Gareth, and as we open up to all of you as well, is to really dive deeply into an honest exploration of pangolins, of connection and of consciousness. And we're not exactly sure where this conversation will go and which direction and how deep we'll go with it. So this is going to be an unfolding in the moment. We do value your questions, and towards the end of this session, we're going to be inviting questions. So if you have any, please make a note of them. There's no point putting them in the chat because by the time there's been more comments, I'm just not going to find them. So save those to the end. And at the end of this part with you, I'm also going to explain to you what we're doing in part 2, where we're definitely going to be allowing a lot more space for Q&A, so that together with you, the three of us can explore these 3 subjects deeply. Okay, so let me introduce you to Alexis. Alexis, I'm just going to pin you for a minute so everybody can see you while I chat about you. So like that, you can. So, ALEXIS KRIEL is the African Pangolin Working Group's co-chairperson. She comes from a media background as a journalist and a filmmaker. She has managed her own businesses. She has an international certification in wildlife rehabilitation from the IWRC, which is the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, and is a member of the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group. Alexis, would you mind just explaining what IUCN stands for? Can you hear me? Just unmute yourself. I will come back to you. I can't find your dots to unmute you. Okay, I'll keep going. We'll come back to you in a second.
There you go.
Thanks.
I had to wait for you to unmute me, I think. Sorry, P. Hi, everybody. Yeah, great to be here with you all and to be back with P, who's become such a friend and support to our organization, which is the African Pangolin Working Group, and a friend to pangolins. The IUCN is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and it is made up of specialists, species specialists from around the world that gather in specialist groups and assist and inform through research and other modalities. I mean, specialists are from all areas of life, so possibly working with indigenous communities, doing training and developing of resource material. All of these different elements contribute to the conservation of pangolins, and the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group, of which I'm a member and a few of our organization members are also members, is made up of about 150 pangolin specialists from around the world. And we engage and contribute to conversations, offer our expertise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me carry on with your bio because I know you've got an awful lot to say. we'll get there. We will get there.
Thanks, P.
All right, Di. So Alexis started working with the pangolins in 2014 with the rehabilitation of pangolin pups in the Central African Republic. And she qualifies as one of a handful of people in the world who has worked hands-on with 3 of the 4 African pangolin species. And in talking with the ancient ones, Alexis brings knowledge of what it means to be a conscious person, a process that she started when she moved into a temple at the age of 24. And she has continued to pursue self-development and personal transformation while applying her professional skills to the task of saving pangolins from extinction. Wonderful, thank you. I'm just going to now, I'm going to spotlight you, Gareth. I'm going to introduce you as well for everyone to get to meet you. So, Gareth was born and raised in South Africa, but spent most of his school holidays in the wild in Zimbabwe, which is where his deep love of nature was seeded, although he would only reap the fruits of this much later on in his mid-30s. Gareth left school early with the aim to race superbikes. This was put aside to work on them as a mechanic and engineer. He'd always had an unquenchable thirst to understand the intricacies and inner workings of things. While studying engineering, he stumbled onto poker, which then became all-consuming. Observing and understanding people fascinated him. Discerning truth in the arena of deception became all-consuming. While playing poker, he started a successful real estate and management company, which then took over his life. Eventually, the mundane began frustrating him. Looking for meaning in his life, he began his studies of metaphysics and ontology through various brotherhoods, societies, mystery schools under a mentor, and eventually his teacher, who he is still studying with today. Uninspired by the mundane, he began seeking adventure, which led him to picking up a camera and returning to the African wild. Here, surrounded by wildlife, he found the greatest sense of purpose, peace, and meaning. Nothing he had done in his life prior to this had truly activated his heart. He then quite serendipitously found pangolin, who expanded my heart beyond anything I could have imagined. Pangolin became my greatest teacher, he said. That was 4 years ago. And since then, Gareth has spent thousands of hours in the presence of these souls, which has without a doubt been the greatest privilege of this life cycle so far. I am now a wildlife photographer and filmmaker, and according to others, a pangolin whisperer. So that is Gareth Thomas. And I'm holding this platform for Alexis and Gareth and I to explore pangolins with you. I'm an animal communicator of 16 years with 3 books. The Pride membership, where we meet to listen to a different species each month, and the Conversations with Nature World Summit. And the next one will be in April next year, plus a lot of other things going on. So, Alexis, if I can find you, I will hand over to you, my darling, to start talking about pangolins.
Okay, here I am.
There you are, found you.
So the thing about pangolins is that a lot of people have never heard of them. And although their identity and knowledge of them was raised publicly in around 2016, when, you know, they were declared the most poached mammal on the planet. So, and at CITES, which is the Convention for the International Trade in Endangered Species, they were listed as an Appendix 1 animal. So this means that there is no trade, international trade in pangolins allowed. But the trade has continued. And the sort of dichotomy is that most people don't know what a pangolin is. They don't even know that pangolins exist, and yet they're the most trafficked, traded mammal on the planet. So the reason that people don't know that they exist is because they're often, you know, not profiled, because they're quiet, they're solitary, they're silent, they're secretive. They generally live in the undergrowth of trees or very high up in the canopy of trees. 50 to 100 meters high would be for the arboreal species that are resident in, you know, other parts of Africa, not South Africa. Here we have the Temminck's pangolin. So there are 4 species of pangolin in Africa and 4 in Asia. And the one that we have in South Africa is the Temminck's pangolin, which is a medium-sized pangolin. It's probably the size of a small dog with a long, big tail, and weighs up to about 12 to 15 kgs max at adulthood. The reason that they're so traded, this is just a very quick background to the trade, and we can get into it more if you want to at a later stage, or, you know, with questions. The reason that they're so traded is because they're considered the medicine man by so many cultures and indigenous people. They are this highly prized spiritual animal. The medicine man, the wise man, the protector. And their scales are ground up and used in traditional medicine in Asia, and for thousands of years. And 40% of the Chinese population believe in and use traditional medicine, and that is a population of around 4 billion people. So the Chinese pangolins have been over-harvested, and they are now either endangered or critically endangered. And the harvesting of pangolins in Asia has turned to Africa, where huge amounts, tons and tons of pangolin scales leave African shores for Asia. They're also a favorite bushmeat item, and with populations increasing all the time, this is equally unsustainable. So this is what we're dealing with, and the reason why we're speaking about pangolins today, and why I think the value of it for everybody here is that me and Gareth work with them directly. and that we've been having these conversations with P, which we wanted to share with you, for awareness about pangolins and for an intimate sharing that, you know, we will all learn from. So we value your contributions, and we will definitely get to engage with everybody here as well. That's what I wanted to say about the trade. And I think I'll hand over to Gareth. Gareth?
Okay, Gareth, over to you, darling.
Hi, so thanks, Alexis, and thanks, Pea, for holding the space. Yeah, I think just to give everyone some sort of an idea of pangolin as a being, as a species, I think one of the most common questions we get asked, anyone who deals with these animals, is, do they have personality and do they have a character? The answer to that is yes. They have incredibly big personalities and they have magical characters. Each one of them are individuals. They each have their own personalities. They each have their own quirks, their likes, their dislikes, and everything like that. So just to give you an idea of sort of the process, obviously Alexis mentioned the wildlife trade and everything like that. So we have task forces here, especially set up and geared around retrieving pangolins from poachers and saving these animals from the illegal wildlife trade. Those animals then are brought to the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet. At the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet, they're obviously taken care of. They are a specialist species, so they do take incredibly specific caring requirements. Pangolins, or at least our pangolins here in South Africa, the Timmins pangolin, it doesn't eat in captivity. So you can't just put a plate of ants in front of one of these animals that have come out the illegal wildlife trade, which means that someone has to take this animal out every single day and put it in the wild and walk around with it and essentially follow this animal while it finds food. Depending on the condition of them when they come out of the illegal wildlife trade, sometimes they need a lot of assistance. They need to be guided, to be helped, and to be reassured. So, you know, 50% of what the rehabilitation process is also that psychological rehabilitation. These animals have obviously suffered immense trauma. They've often been starved to within an inch of their life. They've been held in unimaginable conditions. They've been treated badly, and they have been surrounded by darkness. So a lot of what the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet and the volunteers that are involved, like myself, what we do is a lot to do with the psychological rehabilitation. So besides taking these animals out for between, say, 2, sometimes even 6 hours every single day and walking them in the African wild, a lot of it is just providing the space where these animals feel safe and can start that recovery. One thing that just stands out and has always just been a standout characteristic of pangolin for me is their intuition. These little beings have the most incredible intuition and sense of people. It's difficult to describe. I've seen it firsthand where they've been taken out of the possession of poachers, and is literally the moment that they're in the arms of their rescuer, they open up, and you can see their body physically relax. They know that they are safe. Obviously, having been held in that sort of darkness for so long, it does stay with them. It does take them a lot to let go of that trauma, which is partly what we help them with. And they do, as I mentioned, they have this incredible intuition, which I've often described as, everyone knows how a dog has the sixth sense, or this incredible intuition that if someone walks in a room and they're bad, they know that that person's potentially bad news. I've described pangolins as having that, except times 1,000. These animals sense people just like no other creature I've ever encountered. Yeah, so that's a sort of overview. So that's where my involvement comes in. I have a complete infatuation with these animals. Aesthetically as well, I'm a photographer, so I've spent an inordinate amount of time looking at them through a camera, which, you know, in a way has given me the ability to be very, very focused on them. They love attention. They do. And they especially love when people are in awe of them. They love that reaction when people see them and they just know that they're in the presence of this incredibly enchanting animal. They sense that from us and they do love it. Yeah.
I think the funny thing, I'm going to jump in, Gareth, because it's a conversation. I think the funny thing about that is that they're so nonchalant. They are so nonchalant, you know, that if they love the awe, and I've seen people drop to their knees when they see a pangolin, and biologists consider seeing a pangolin like shaking hands with a deity, because they are rare, they are, you know, on the brink of extinction. They're very hard to see in the wild. They've been on this planet for 50 million years, which so crosses over with the last age of dinosaurs. And they're so distinct because they're the only mammal with scales. But the other thing about mammals, which is interesting, is that, you know, they breastfeed their young, and they are a certain kind of creature, mammals. So the fact that they love attention and respond to affection and sense people, I think possibly, although I can't categorize that because I've felt that in birds and reptiles and all kinds of things, but I think being a mammal has something to do with that. But just going back to them being very nonchalant is the fact that they just kind of go about their business finding and eating ants. And, you know, that just struck me.
I was wondering, Gareth, do you remember the first time that you met a pangolin, the very first encounter?
Yes, without a doubt. So I've actually never seen a pangolin in the wild to this day. I've seen pangolins in the wild that have been rescued, have gone through rehabilitation. I myself have never actually seen a wild pangolin that has just never been touched by man. The first time I saw a pangolin was at the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet. I remember his name. He was the first pangolin that I ever actually took out walking as well. His name was KP.
Thank you. And what was that feeling like when you first met him?
It's difficult to describe. It's like seeing an enigma. I mean, they're just unlike any other animal. there's just this, I can't really describe what it is, but they just have this incredible presence, which I think just moves people immediately into their heart. It really is. It's this magical thing that happens to people when they see them. I've seen grown men just completely softened. I've seen the most hardened, you know, guys that are working with human trafficking, guys that are working with arms trafficking, and these very, very hard men. And I've seen them see a pangolin and their entire body presence and being just completely softens around this animal. Yeah, it is for me, it was a softening experience, and they have this incredible ability just to immediately connect you with your heart. I think you'd agree. I think P's going to fetch your package, but I think you can also attest to that, Alexis.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that the fascination with them almost starts before you encounter them, for a lot of people. And I know that it did for me, because I'd started hearing about them for a while before I first saw a pangolin. When I took a volunteer opportunity up in Central Africa, and there were the two other pangolin species, the black-bellied and white-bellied pangolins. And they're small. I mean, they go up to 2.5 kgs at adulthood. And when I walked into the room and I saw the little black-bellied pangolin, who was only, I think she was about 6 weeks to 2 months old. And the people who ran the lodge there, Sangha Lodge, Rod Cassidy, said to me, pick her up. And I almost sort of didn't know what to do, but I was dying to hold her and feel her and connect with her. So I picked her up, and she turned her back on me, and she walked away, and she climbed up onto Tamar's arm, who's Rod's wife, who'd been looking after them. And she just was very, very distinct about the fact that she wasn't going to warm to me quickly. And it took a couple of days, and then we became very, very close. Yeah, that amused me as well. And I often think about it, you know, she just absolutely distinctly turned her back on me and walked away. And I think pangolins do have favorites. And I think that you've been a favorite of pangolins, Gareth. And it's interesting, because we often say that, you know, pangolins that are retrieved from the illegal trade are very sensitive to certain things, and it's often men that they're sensitive to, because poachers are often men, and other things as well. But you've always, you know, been a favorite of pangolins, and why do you think that is?
You know, I think I do really believe it's just because of this incredible awe that I do have for them. I really believe it's just like anything else. If you look at someone, any animal with you know, and just an incredible amount of awe and wonder and love, it's hard not to respond positively to that. And I think, I must admit, I think photography was a big part of that, because, you know, when you're photographing them, you are just completely 100% present with them. You're fixated on them. And I think that's got a large part to play in it. But yeah, I mean, my sort of feeling is love is really the recognition of our shared being. And however you choose to direct that recognition and how you amplify that recognition, whatever you direct that towards will respond. And I think naturally, or somehow, I've just managed to do that with pangolin. And really, when I'm with them, they just have my absolute attention, and they know that, and I think they appreciate that, and they respond to that. I think like any of us would as well.
And I think that also goes for other animals, Gareth. When we hold that same level of awe for other species, they feel it. They feel that pure intention. They feel that unconditional love. Everything that awe encapsulates, and they respond because of that connection that we form through that.
What sort of zone do you go into, Gareth, when you say that you you become conscious of the shared oneness of all beings? Where are you at? What sort of zone do you go into?
I think it's just the easiest way to describe it would be purely present. I think that's I mean, we can all be in awe of something and recognize what's happening around us, but we're often very distracted. And I think we spend so much time walking with these animals, and the fact that these animals are so forgiving, which is another thing that's just really come through for me with pangolin, is they're held in these horrific conditions, and then within a couple of days they walking next to us and they accept us as their companions. They don't hold any sort of grudge against mankind. They forgive, they let go, and they move on, and they exist in the present moment. And that's when you're in that space with them, I think you can't help but to have their sort of presence bring you into that present moment. And I think that's where connection is fostered the most, in that present moment. If you're distracted by a phone call or something like that, you sort of step out of that. But I think I'm incredibly lucky in the sense that because I've spent so much time with them, it's almost like meditation. You practice more and more often and you get good at it. I can go into that present moment with these animals at the drop of a dime. And I think I find sometimes they realize that I can, and they will give me signals when I'm with them, and sort of little reminders. If I'm distracted or my mind starts wandering or anything like that, I definitely think there have been moments where they've sort of looked at me and said, "Hey, I'm down here. Let's refocus." So yeah, I would say it's just pure presence. Yeah.
No, I hear you.
Alex, I was just wondering whether you'd like to tell us about your experience with the pangolin pup that you've cared for and helped.
Well, I cared for 2 pangolin pups. The one was slightly older, and then a second one came in, which was a different species. The one was a female and the other was a male. The one was nocturnal and the other was diurnal. And we were in a clearing of the rainforest. So it was a very significant time for me, and actually changed the course of my life, because I became fully involved with pangolins at that point. And yeah, I mean, I think as Gareth says, you know, and I respond to what he's saying. It's a kind of intense focus. It's a kind of intense focus on where you are. It's a complete involvement in the experience that you're having. And I think that you could actually have that experience with any activity, but I don't think that we do. And I think any activity, actually any work that you do will inform you if you come to it with complete focus and connection and intensity. But for pangolins, because they're so fascinating, I mean, this little black-bellied pangolin, she's a tree pangolin, and they have a prehensile tail, which helps them to, you know, climb up to 50 to 100 meters high up into the canopy of rainforests. And, you know, she just endlessly fascinated me, endlessly. I mean, you know, you never want to stop watching her, you know. I mean, I saw her climbing up a piece of string. I mean, that is their climbing ability. They've obviously got this unbelievable core. If you think about the way, I don't know what those worms are that sort of bend up in the middle and then straighten and bend up in the middle when they traverse. Well, she moved a little bit like that when she climbed. And there were all kinds of things. I mean, just spending endless amounts of time with her. She loved water. She climbed up into a basin at one point, and we let the water drip, and she just sort of flung herself around in the basin, in the water. She just didn't want to stop. You know, she wanted to endlessly go on playing in the water. And pangolin pups do play, and that's the interesting thing. I see my colleague Nikki Wright also entered the room, Gareth. And Nikki hand-reared a pangolin almost from birth because the mother was too compromised to look after her. And you know, we always commented intimately, and you know, this isn't sort of the kind of thing you share as scientific. It's the kind of intimate things you share with other people who are involved with pangolins. But the games that she would play, you know, you could tickle her tummy and she would sort of, you know, fling herself back and then roll up into a ball, and like you would do with a baby. Or when she was finished eating, she would, you know, come up to your feet and put her front feet onto you as if to say, like, uppy, let's go home, you know. And of course, there's always a, you know, very fine line when you're working with these species in a conservation environment, that the intention is to release them back into the wild. So our intention is definitely not to, you know, keep these animals as sort of imprinted animals in a contained or you know, domestic environment. Not at all. But they do wild up. They do wild up very well, and their instincts kick in. And being solitary, actually, in a sense, Gareth, I don't know how you feel about you know, the solitary nature of pangolins, but you know, they don't seek out company. That's the truth of it. They don't seek out company because they're solitary. So it's interesting that they would have a relationship with human beings. It is very interesting, and I think that they relate. You know, maybe more openly and interactively than a lot of other animals would. Certainly a wild animal. Gareth?
So it's interesting, Alexis, in obviously the APWG, African Pangolin Working Group, started the project in KZN, where pangolins had been locally extinct for, I think around 3 decades, and the African Pangolin Working Group started a project to reintroduce them. And one of the things that when I was there I was there last week in KwaZulu-Natal. One of the things that the one pangolin monitorer was mentioning to me is that when these animals are establishing their territory in the wild, and this is obviously in an area where they're locally extinct, there is the possibility that they are establishing areas not on top of each other where they might interact with each other, but as next door neighbors. And that's something that only time will tell. But, you know, it seems like if they put them, say, in one area of the reserve where there aren't any other pangolins, they could possibly be moving towards the area where there are other pangolins and then establishing a territory as a next door neighbor. So, you know, we think of them as solitary, and we can't really understand why they might want to be in our presence. A thought that I had when I was there, it's just we rely on close proximity, very, very close proximity, in order to communicate our senses are auditory, and we rely on that auditory exchange to communicate. I've experienced pangolins having this intuition and the sense of people far before I could see anyone, I could hear anyone, or knew that someone was coming, but the animal did. So maybe it's something along the lines of, you know, we think of them as solitary because they're not walking next to each other and everything like that. Is it possible that maybe they just have a way of sensing each other from a far greater distance than we do?
I think that's a really interesting thought, actually, like another level of communication. I wanted to try and share this little, because I saw someone just vaguely, because I'm not going into the chat. I don't want to sort of take my eyes off the screen in the conversation, but someone was asking for pictures. So I just want to see if I can share this little video, P.
Yeah, do that. Otherwise, I can share a picture. I've got a picture ready. A video would be great. Oh yeah, this is a great video.
Can you
get a bit deeper, so because when it's just when it's shallow, the water's too warm.
And she
The
likes
water's obviously
it
cold enough.
completely enveloping her.
Yeah. There we go. That's the one she wants.
Oh, look, it's like, yeehaw! Oh, that must be glorious.
She's having a great time. It's amazing.
I know. Yeah, I've got a picture.
I will move it away from the phone.
That is sweet.
Move.
Oh, they just love their baths, don't they?
They do.
How old do you think that pangolin is?
That was Ditzy. Did you know Ditzy, Gareth?
Yeah, I was with her last week as well. So she's still in soft release in KZN. I always called her a bonsai because she is just a tiny little pangolin. So she came into the Joburg Wildlife Vet very young. I can't remember how old. It's difficult. We don't really have a way of aging them. We would guess relative to their weight, possibly, but then again, now we're learning that each animal is an individual, and maybe it's not the most accurate way. But I mean, if I had to guess off the top of my head, I would say Ditzy is probably about anything up to 2 years, possibly.
Really? As old as that, Gareth?
Yeah, I mean, she was, maybe a year and a half. She came into the vet very young, and she's been in her she went through quite a long rehabilitation period. I think possibly around 6 months, and she's now been in soft release for, I think, anything up to 6 months. So that's a year. We maybe got her into the Joburg. Yeah, maybe 6 months. So yeah, anything around maybe a year and a half. It's just really impossible to say.
And how's she doing, Gareth?
She's doing very well. She is doing very well. I don't think she's far off going into full release. Yeah.
And Nikki, thanks for answering the questions in the chat. It's fantastic to have you there. Please carry on answering the questions. That's wonderful. Nikki,
I was going to actually say the opposite. I was saying, don't answer the questions.
Oh,
Still, because we want to do a whole hour and a half next time. But I think that'll be
all right. Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah, Nikki's my co-chair on the African Pangolin Working Group, so it's great to have her here. And there aren't many people that I come across in the conservation arena that also have a private sort of spiritual life. I do. It's not something that I speak about a lot. It's more of an internal process, or the process that I've internalized. But I feel it very strongly every day. And Nikki and Gareth also very, very actively involved in his spiritual life. And in fact, so is Nikki. So we're lucky in that, we're in good company. But the conservation arena is mainly a science arena. Of course, there are a lot of activists as well, and business people. I mean, I'm running the office of the African Pangolin Working Group at the moment. So I don't have a lot of contact with pangolins. I don't think I've seen a pangolin probably in over a year. And it's something that I need to organize and get out there and spend some time with them again. But essentially, whatever we've ever done and whatever work we do, we're bringing to this arena. And that, as I've said before, it's sort of, when it becomes too difficult to not do anything, you start getting involved, and there's really no going back, not as long as this animal is in the situation it's in. And I think it's sort of a remarkable experience to be living that kind of life, because we are walking on the edge of extinction with this animal. It's almost walking the line between life and death, which is anyway a very miraculous place. I've spent time with dying people, and it really truly is the most miraculous place. And I think, Gareth, you had mentioned in our chat with P previously how it was interesting how pangolins had chosen, and I'm also thinking about your use of that word chosen, but they'd chosen to be the most poached mammal on the planet, and that is really quite an identity to have, and quite a role to take on. Can you say a bit more about that?
So just to sort of give context to that, my experience is a non-dual one. So just to explain that, just to give a little bit of an explanation for non-dualism, I hold that the same consciousness through which I experience reality is the very same consciousness through which everyone experiences reality. That includes all life, from pangolins to lions, all of it, and all the way through to the insect realm, plant life, all life. I hold that the physical experience is a consequence of consciousness, and not vice versa. So when I said that pangolins have chosen to be the most trafficked mammal on earth, what I mean by that is I see pangolins as an aspect of ourselves. I don't see any separation between myself and pangolin. I don't see any separation between myself and nature. And within that, pangolins being an aspect of ourselves, we've chosen it as much as they have. Essentially, we're all in this together. And we're all doing this all together. And throughout human history, there have been totem animals. And I think that we identify with these different totem animals, and they hold themselves almost as symbols of that period of human evolution and that period of human consciousness, awareness. And at the moment, that animal is pangolin. And, you know, ironically, they're the most trafficked mammal on earth. But I mean, I've even noticed in the chat, a lot of people haven't seen them. A lot of people don't even know what a pangolin is. And symbolically, this animal very much for me represents the human condition, in that they have a very tough exterior, but when they open up and expose their heart, they have a very soft and tenderness to them. And that would appear to be quite succinct with the human condition. We walk around our day-to-day lives and we put on a hard exterior, and, you know, we've all got the softness and tenderness inside of us, which we don't necessarily open up to everyone around us. So when I say pangolin is chosen to be the most trafficked mammal on earth, what I mean by that is they, as much as they have, when I say they, I mean we have as well. As I said, I don't hold them as separate from us in any way whatsoever. We put this animal out there and we're holding them in the space where symbolically they signify a shift in maybe how we interact with nature. If we look at animals that have been the focus of sort of conservation and the conservation community, a lot, I mean, it's very much so maybe an African perspective, but here in South Africa especially, it's a lot of rhino, it's a lot to do with elephant. And if you look at symbolically what these animals are, is these are warriors. They're hardened animals, they're tough, they're strong, they're giant. And I think they could very much symbolize our interaction with nature, in the sense that we have taken a very domineering approach to nature and how we interact with our natural environment. And I think as pangolin, that symbol and that awareness and that consciousness around pangolin starts to really become more prevalent, I think we're going to see a softening, and where mankind really sort of accesses that vulnerability within us.
Yeah, I think that the more that we are aware of what's happening with the natural world, the more sensitive we're becoming to it. But I think it's interesting when you do, P, I want you to also jump in here, but it's interesting when you talk about spiritual consciousness, Gareth. And I know that here we're in the beautiful company of people that are already often maybe communicating with animals in a certain way. And as P said earlier, you know, communication differs. But you know, I think that uplifting the consciousness of people on this planet is probably, and I said that in the conversation with you and P last week, for me is probably should be the primary goal. And maybe we should all be teaching meditation. You know, if that is going to uplift people and sort of create more of a conscious space. For you, in terms of consciousness, what is for you a powerful process?
For me or for Gareth?
Well, for you, definitely P first, and then also for Gareth.
My little cat here is having a go at my plant.
Because plants are people too.
Yeah, they are, and I don't want you to eat her. It's a big question, that what is consciousness to me? Answering as P, consciousness to me is that inner knowing of connection with all that is. You know, it's that presence of where there is no separation, and being fully awake, which is very hard to achieve as a human incarnated, with the distractions of modern life. When I'm communicating with any animal, including the pangolins who communicated with in October 2021, because they stepped forward as talking to the pride. It's the same with any species, I have to say, when communicating, and it's sort of similar process to you, Gareth. And I think we have slightly different words for it, where I am bringing myself present and releasing any sense of doing to just being, which is also hard for a human being to do. And then letting everything else around me fall away is one way of kind of like describing it, so that the ego goes with the, am I doing this? Am I connected? Is this happening? That goes, everything is falling away. When I'm so connected with an animal and so fully present with them, it's just me and them in this moment of, it's like a vacuum. But also on the other side, and that's often with a species who, I don't know why, but vultures keep coming to me during this whole conversation.
Wow.
So with a species like that, I will not have an awareness of anything else going on. I'll just be fully present with them. And the same with the pangolins when I was communicating with them in 2021. But if I'm communicating with an animal I live with, it's different, because I'm so aware of them and interact with them daily that the conversation is more like with a human. You know, it can just be instant like that. And I don't have to think about things falling away and that strong presence. I only go there when in emergencies, for example, you know, if one of the animals is in trouble, then I have to quickly release everything else and be fully present to connect with them energetically, consciousness to consciousness, in a sense where we know there is no separation.
We're so sort of attached to personality, you know. I mean, when, you know, sort of defining consciousness. I mean, if I think of what you're saying, and I think of being in that space where I just let everything go and, you know, experience the consciousness of an animal, I wonder to myself, what is that consciousness? You know, what am I What am I relating to? And of course, you know, conversation does sort of denote relationship, and relationship's not really a function of the non-dual space. But anyway, that's kind of philosophical. But
can I just sort of butt in there, because I've just thought of something. The other thing about consciousness is it's non-local as well. You can move your consciousness wherever you want it to go. It doesn't have to stay in this vessel that we call a human being body. And of course, when our physical body dies, that consciousness, that spark of spirit, of soul, continues on and does continue to exist. It's let the physical vessel go. Who was I talking to? A species the other day was talking about labels and about how we like to label everything. It was Jaguar, I think. Maybe the pride can help me here. Wasn't it Jaguar that was talking about, who are you? Was the very first question from Jaguar this month. Because our names are not who we are.
And P, how did you sort of develop, what was your process of developing this conscious way of seeing? I mean, we are born with it, but then, we have so much conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, we're all born with it. It's innate. It's just part of being an animal of the animal kingdom. It's a part of being a sentient being within the natural world. But because we develop technology and because we have clothes and we have cars and we have busy lives, we forget to, I think we move out of trust with our intuition, because that's essentially what it is. It's that inner sense, that inner compass that connects us with each other. And on a simple, in a simple way, we go into a building and we like the vibe or we don't like the vibe. That's our inner sense, intuition giving us feedback. And it's as easy as that. It's the stuff that gets in the way that has to then be dismantled. That these barriers build up. And that's the hardest thing, actually, is for people to let go of the stuff that is just in the way, just in the way of them and a true, honest connection with another being. I think once we start to listen, to be present and really focus on listening, it starts to evolve. For me, I was an atheist and I was really skeptical at the beginning. When animal communication came into my life through my dog Morgan arriving in my life, that led me to an animal communication workshop, I nearly walked out. I honestly didn't believe a word of it. I was so far from where I am now. And I used to believe death was the end and that was it. It was black, end, final. But then Morgan arrived, I attended a workshop, and then this experience happened with my cat Texas, where a stranger told me things she couldn't possibly know. And that just got me to, I had to challenge my belief systems about what I thought the world was about and how animals related to us. And, actually they do have these thoughts and feelings that they can communicate, and that we can communicate with them. And that's, just turned my view of the world upside down, I think, in a great way.
Wow. Well, that's testament to you being completely open, and liberating yourself from everything that you thought or were attached to before, P.
Yeah, and I think that's been a process as well. I wouldn't say that it happened overnight. I've been I tested it out a bit. I asked, a fly landed on my hand, and I asked the fly if I can communicate, go around this parasol, come back and land on my hand. And the fly did that 3 times for me before I went, okay, I accept that I can communicate with a fly, therefore I can communicate with insects. And yes, you can communicate with humans, clearly. That was one of the life-changing moments. And then there's been various ones of those over the past 16 years that have helped me to grow as a person.
Yeah, so P, it's interesting, as you said, you know, I think we sort of do a similar thing, but we use different wording for it. I obviously don't get any sort of clear words in my head, or anything like that. So I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm a animal communicator by any stretch. I feel that being in their presence allows me an expanded understanding of myself. If I had to be asked on the topic of conscious, or if I had to be asked what is consciousness, I mean there's a reason why in quantum physics it's called the hard problem, but I would hold consciousness as cause, everything else the effect. And I guess in that sense, I would say that everything is conscious. So it's similar to what you're saying about the fly, you know, communicating with maybe a fly all the way to people. I've sort of said that the inability to identify personality within a thing doesn't reflect the lack of personality in that thing. It reflects the lack of personality in the observer, not the observed. So when we focus, and obviously I've done this with pangolins just because I've spent so much time with them, I've been able to identify that mostly in them because I have directed my awareness towards them so much. And I've been able to identify that personality within them. And from that, the same line of thinking has arisen where I would hold that if you stare at a rock for long enough, you should be able to eventually identify a personality within it. You know, I mean, quantum physics is just, I am, you know, that sort of quintessential born in the 1980s male, very masculine. I like to rationalize everything, and I wasn't really brought up in this. I wasn't brought up in a space of lack of love, but my environment was a very rational one. And I love where quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all of this sort of thing is going now, because it's really opening up so many more avenues for us to explore, in the sense of, you know, I don't know if you know, in quantum physics, with superpositioning, we have something called the observer effect, where just by the observer observing the experiment, it has an effect on the outcome of the experiment, which essentially, very basically speaking, means that we're having an effect on our environment all the time, just by where we direct our awareness. We direct our awareness at a thing, we are affecting that thing. And that, for me, confirms non-dualism. It confirms very much so that there is this just underlying connection, and through this incredible tapestry of awareness and consciousness, that we're now slowly becoming, I don't think we're learning anything new. I hold everything as a remembering. I don't feel as though this is something new that's happening, a new experience. If consciousness is the cause and everything else the effect, then essentially we are just re-experiencing through a new vessel, and possibly moving away from amnesia.
Gareth, won't you talk a little bit about your experience with Stevie? Because I know that he was the first pangolin that you sort of had a very conscious relationship with, I think. And you called Stevie your teacher, and you learned so many things from him. And I know that you've just been with him now. Won't you speak about Stevie a bit?
Yeah, sure. So Stevie was a baby pangolin. He was rescued by the African Pangolin Working Group, and he was so incredibly young. We think that when the poachers had him, he would have been with his mother, and she potentially managed to allow him to suckle for long enough for us to get to him. Unfortunately, we never did get his mom. So he was a baby pangolin. He was hand reared at the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet, and I was one of the primary carers. So I spent just about as much as possible. Yeah, just almost every day for months on end with this little being. And it was interesting for me because I'm not a conservationist. I'm not an animal rehabilitator. I've got no background in conservation. I've got no background in wildlife rehabilitation, none of it. So, you know, when I was sort of handed this baby pangolin to now take out and to help guide him and teach him how to be a pangolin, it was quite a nerve-wracking experience for me. It made me feel incredibly vulnerable because, I mean, I've never hand raised a wild animal before. So, you know, there was that thought of, am I going to get this right? What if I do something wrong? We've got to find the limits. What if he goes beyond the limits? What that did was that activated a very nurturing aspect in me. And it activated a nurturing part of me that I wasn't really very in touch with. What that did is it softened me as well. So when I was around Stevie, it was just this incredible experience of pure focus on him in the softest space I could possibly be. And what that did was that eventually, with him seeing so many things for the first time and exploring things for the first time, I guess in a way I got to somewhat live vicariously through him. And what came of that was I got to almost see the world through Stevie and with Stevie, but also through Stevie. And everything was new, and it very much took me into a new perspective of nature, and it allowed me a closeness with nature that I hadn't really experienced. And because, as P was saying, you know, you've got to let go of this conditioning. We all have this conditioning, our past, where we come from, what we've been taught in school, what we've been taught by the people around us, our friends, our family, political, social, all of it. We're just this product of everything around us. And we don't really get to experience this reality in an objective way whatsoever. So being with this brand new life and experiencing the world and so many new things for the first time, he allowed me and acted as a vehicle for me and a conduit for me to experience nature in a very new, a very pure, and from a very nurturing place. And that just awakened something within me. And it was really through him where I started identifying the personalities in ants. It sounds bizarre.
We
but-
love ants. Ants are a big part of our lives.
Yeah. And, you know, I started realizing that I'd been walking around and, you know, I interact with ants virtually all the time for hours on end, but I'd never actually taken the time to appreciate that they have personalities too. And, you know, I had these sort of moments where I was thinking, you know, from the perspective of ant, you see this giant pangolin coming with this huge tongue coming to, you know, raid your city and your whole environment and everything. And I sort of got this, I sort of the one day heard this like sort of screaming of the ants, and I was like, oh God, that's so traumatic. Yeah, so that was Stevie, and I think what did it was because he softened me so much. You know, we're so hardened by our environment, and we're just so. I've started thinking that disconnection doesn't actually exist. So this is sort of a thought process that I'm still working through, but I don't believe that disconnect exists. Otherwise, we wouldn't. So I think my lights have just come back on. So I think we go through varying degrees of connection. And I think the narrative that's out there at the moment that we become disconnected is wrong. I don't think we can disconnect. If we were disconnected, there wouldn't be existence. I think that sort of idea that, you know, people are disconnected is more maybe left in the 90s and pre-2000 with Newtonian sort of physics. And I think that, I mean, especially as sort of a male in this very masculine society that we live in nowadays, you know, especially as a male, we're taught that we need to be tough, we need to be strong, we can't be emotional, we can't be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a weakness. Being emotional is a weakness. And I feel like that does hold us back from just softening into pure awareness. And it's in that pure awareness that we really, really do amplify the connection. We don't connect because we're always connected, but I think it's in that very soft state of the heart that we amplify that connection with everything around us. And when I say Stevie was my teacher, that's what he taught me.
Fabulous, fabulous.
That's so beautiful. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, and I'm just wondering whether we want to take a couple of questions before we finish. And I know that we're going to focus on questions a lot in the next session. But if anybody has a question and want to put your hands up, I will see if I can come to you. Okay, let's hope it's a quick question. There you go. Would you like to unmute?
Yes, certainly. Hi, the name is Cypher.
Hi,
I was
Cypher.
wanting to touch on the topic of traditional medicine use. And just briefly, as I view it, there is a desired benefit, but you cannot take things out of context. You know, if the scales are not found in nature and the animal have shed them naturally, I would say if you take it from violated animals, you would get a curse, right? It's a bit like taking feathers from a farm dog or something like that and using it in a dream catcher. It doesn't have the same effect. So my question is then, how do we partake in creating that consumption pattern that is part of creating this violation of these pangolins, and how can I act on it from where I am? You know, I can't go help out in South Africa and stuff like that. Thank you. That's the question.
Thank you. So that's probably a question that a lot of people have, isn't it? Which is, how can we help?
I think we should go into that question in more detail next week,
Okay,
Saifa.
yeah, it's quite a big
Um, Yeah, I think it is a big question, really huge, actually. And the thing is that people and animals can't be separated either. And you know that there are complex situations that this trade has evolved out of, and especially where traditional medicine is concerned. I think we should get into it in more detail. I like your line of thinking, the fact that you know the power, potency, magic resides in, you know, a living feather, a living scale, a living being, and that, you know, taking it off and away from the animal is a violation. I like that way of thinking.
So that's something very much, and I think I'm quite lucky because I'm not a part of the conservation community, and you know, I'm not a scientist or anything like that. And I think I can maybe say some fairly outlandish things, or some things that might be viewed as quite contentious without repercussion. And you know, the problem with where we have this problem where, you know, exactly as you say, so if the use of pangolin scales is for healing, then traumatizing that animal to the point of death and then harvesting those scales, in every spiritual belief system, that is darkness. That's dark magic, and that will only cause dis-ease. That's not going to alleviate any suffering. That's not going to do anything but cause actual dis-ease. And that is an awareness that I think it's very difficult to put that out there, that message, because unfortunately, you know, well, I say unfortunately, but maybe not unfortunately, the narrative at the moment is the scales have no use whatsoever, and everyone who's using them in traditional medicines is absolutely wrong. There's nothing to it. Your belief systems, your culture is completely misguided, and everything like that. And something that I've sort of started thinking about is, do we do more damage by just building a wall and blocking those people out of any sort of conversation? Yeah. Or is there the potential to say something along these lines and say, look, within all mystical practices, what you're doing effectively will cause dis-ease. And I mean, at the moment, we're just blocking that conversation out altogether. And I was talking to someone the other day, and there was, you know, we were talking about the most absurd things that science has believed over the last 100 years. And if you look back over the last 100 years and you look at what the world's most profound and educated scientists believed, there is an incredibly high chance that what we hold is absolute truth today is going to be viewed as absolutely absurd and ridiculous in 100 years' time. So I think it personally, and like I said, I'm not associated with any organization. I'm not a conservationist. I have autonomy in what I can say because of that, but I think we're putting up walls where we should possibly be opening conversations.
I agree with you. And I think we should get into this more next week. It's a big conversation. You know, the Conference of the Parties, CITES, has just been meeting, and there have been a lot of discussions around this exact point. And you know, also the polarization of you know, the sort of, anyway, it's a big conversation. I'm not going to get into it now.
Thanks for sharing. Much appreciated. Wise words.
Thank you very much. David and Rita, sadly we've run out of time, but hold your questions please for next time, write them down. I do want to respect everybody's time and to finish on time for us all. So we do meet again in 1 week on the 30th of November. It's going to be exactly the same time for the same length of time. Where I have also written loads of questions down that I want to ask both Alexis and Gareth. So we're going to be like, who's going to get their questions in first? So next time we will be looking at things like polarization, why we are referring to these pangolins as ancient ones. What do they feel? What do they think? What do they say? What do humans need to be learning? What is the path to a closer connection with nature? What is love? And what does Gareth mean when he talks about the feminine side? And how can we reconcile what is happening on the planet and the suffering that we see inflicted on animals at the hands of men? All of these things, so much to discuss as well. Next time, I'm sure we'll be discussing consciousness even more. I discussed with Alexis and Gareth at the beginning, setting a little bit of a homework exercise for you. If you wish to engage with it, it's just an invitation, really. So when I was communicating with the pangolins for the Pride, during that communication, the pangolins asked this question of humans. And so maybe you'd like to write this down and to spend time being present with it. And the pangolins ask, what is it that humanity needs to understand about the connection with wildlife and the planet and your survival? I will read it again. What is it that humanity needs to understand about the connection with wildlife and the planet and your survival? So whether you would label yourself an animal communicator or not, you are a sentient being that can energetically connect. You can ask the pangolins about this. You can ask your own heart, your higher consciousness, and just any thoughts that come to you, maybe in your dreams, make a note of them. And it'd be nice to have a sharing of some of those things at our next meeting. So Alexis, thank you so much. Gareth, thank you so much. Is there any final words you would like to share with everybody?
No, I think there've been some great questions in the chat, P, and if those can be also kept for next week, if we can just make a note of those and then just continue with the discussion. I'm very happy with where we're at, and yeah, just continue.
Thank you.
Gareth?
Yeah, I think I look forward to the questions, and there's so, I mean, we can talk endlessly. I think the main thing is everyone sort of says, what can I do? And I think this is what we do. We have these discussions, we have these conversations, and we put new ideas out there, because unfortunately the old way wasn't working, and we need new thought, and that we come to from being open and having conversations. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will continue our conversation and putting new thoughts out there and into our hearts, letting our hearts feel and speak. And we will meet again in 1 week at the same time. Thank you so much for to everyone that made it live and joined us, for all of your chat. I think you can save the chat, and I certainly can save the chat, so I will make a note of all your questions. But do bring your questions to next time, where we will spend a lot of the session answering you. So thank you so much, and much love, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.